Well, as we mentioned, this is all happening on the heels of President Trump's executive order suspending refugees from entering the United States. The suspension applies to these Muslim-majority nations: Syria, Iraq, Iran, Yemen, Somalia, Sudan, and Egypt. The move has sparked outrage from humanitarian groups and Democratic members of Congress. Minority Leader Senator Chuck Schumer tweeted last night, "There are tears running down the cheeks of the Statue of Liberty tonight." For more, we turn to Jordan Fabian, the White House correspondent from the Hill. Jordan, this executive order to suspend immigration from terror-prone countries, do you believe, is there a sense that this is a Muslim ban? How are people approaching this?
Well, like Albert said, I think it stopped short of a complete Muslim ban. But I think it's clear that it's aimed at Muslims. If you look at the order, it bans people from entering the U.S. for at least 90 days, hailing from those 7 Muslim-majority countries. This affects more than 100 million people. It bans indefinitely refugees coming in from Syria. That's a third of all Muslim refugees coming from that country. And just look at Donald Trump's own words. They're a declaration of intent. During the campaign, he said he wanted to ban all Muslims. He later walked that back. But then if you look at an interview he did yesterday with a Christian broadcasting network, he was asked if he would prioritize Christian refugees over Muslims, and he said yes. So I think that this policy is certainly aimed at Muslims who he believes are going to pose a security threat to the United States. But I think, we can argue about the semantics all you want, but I think it's pretty clear who this order is aimed at.
Well, President Trump signed multiple executive orders and actions this week, we know. But I want to also note that at the beginning of President Obama's term, President Obama also signed an order to close down Guantanamo Bay. It never happened. So tell me, Jordan, how enforceable are these new actions?
Well, I think the Guantanamo Bay comparison is very apt. I'll take one example. Look at the executive order he signed to try to jumpstart the construction of the wall along the Mexican border. If you look at what happened with Guantanamo Bay, the reason it wasn't closed was opposition from Congress and diplomatic troubles. Those same problems could affect the construction of the wall. Under Guantanamo, members of Congress didn't want to build a facility to host those prisoners here on American soil, and foreign countries didn't want to take in the prisoners that were at the facility. Here, we can see funding for the wall, which is needed, by the way, run into opposition in the Senate. We might need 60 votes to pass, and Democrats there might not give it the 60 votes. And we've seen this whole diplomatic flap blow up this week with Mexico, where Donald Trump wants to force Mexico to pay for the wall. They're refusing to do it. The meeting with the Mexican president was called off. So who's going to be left paying for this wall? I think that he's promising to build a wall, and I think that we're going to have to wait and see if that actually happens.
Meanwhile, President Trump has a phone conversation today with Russian President Vladimir Putin, among other leaders of Europe. But I want to ask you about this Putin call. What is the sense? Is there any sense of what to expect from this call?
Well, we've heard both Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin talk about wanting to build this closer relationship that the U.S. and Russia, frankly, haven't had for a very long time. So after the call, we're going to see the reaction from both sides and see if that relationship can be healed. And the other question is whether President Trump is going to lift sanctions on Russia that were imposed for its military intervention in Ukraine in 2014, and the sanctions that were just slapped down by President Obama before he left office for their hacking during the election. Donald Trump hasn't really said what he's going to do with those sanctions. He was asked about it yesterday by the press during a press conference with the UK Prime Minister, and he dodged the question. So I think all of us in the press corps are going to be looking very carefully at what he says after that call to see what he's going to do with sanctions.
I want to talk also about the increased tension with Mexico. We're hearing reports that Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, got involved and possibly spoke to the Mexican foreign minister. There are suggestions of a possible import tax on Mexican goods to pay for this border wall. Is this the beginning of a trade war?
Well, I think a lot of experts believe so, and that's why Donald Trump's White House is trying to do damage control, calling the Mexican president after the meeting was called off. If you look at what would happen if the U.S. were to put an import tax on Mexican goods, that means the price of your strawberries, the price of your avocados, the price of cars are going to go up. A lot of that is imported from Mexico to the U.S. They're our third largest trading partner. And in fact, the U.S. exports a lot of goods back to Mexico. So if Mexico says, hey, you're putting an import tax on our goods, we're going to slap retaliatory tariffs on you, all of a sudden we're exporting less goods to Mexico, not to mention that the World Trade Organization, depending on how this tax is written, if it is in fact imposed, could put additional tariffs on U.S. goods. So we're talking about widespread consequences if this policy goes into place. It's important to remember, though, that the White House quickly walked back this proposal on Thursday. It seems like they got a little bit ahead of themselves. So we'll have to wait and see what happens if they decide to go through with it.
Before I let you go, I want to ask you about the health care debate. Lots of talk about how this is going to impact 20 million people if Obamacare is repealed without a replacement. Republicans have yet to present some sort of a unified plan of replacement. There have been 6 years for them to come up with something. So what's the potential ramifications for Republicans in particular here?
Well, it seems like Republicans are treating Obamacare like a political game of hot potato. They think, at least Donald Trump thinks, and this is what he said to both House and Senate Republicans at the retreat this week in Philadelphia, that if they get their hands on Obamacare and start repealing it and then trying to offer a replacement, which may or may not happen, they could be blamed if Americans start losing their health care. Let's not forget that 20 million Americans right now are covered under Obamacare. And so what President Trump said is the program has problems. Let's see if it falls apart. And if it does, Democrats will bear the political consequences. Obviously, and that idea is not really well received with congressional Republicans. So right now there's just a lot of infighting and there's a lot of confusion and uncertainty about what they want to do with Obamacare. And that's important because this was one of their central campaign promises, repealing Obamacare. And right now it's really unclear if that's going to happen.
Jordan Fabian with The Hill. Thanks for joining us this weekend, Jordan.
Thank you.